Welcome to CRM MVP Podcast, episode number 36. This episode, I guess, we're recording live from South Africa. How awesome is that?
That's awesome.
Yeah, I know. And, one of the reasons why I'm excited to record this episode is because I feel that it's been a long time coming. Like, I've talked to you, and I'm talking to Paul Slade, and I'm going to introduce him in a second. I've talked to you about talking about sales and sort of the messaging behind Dynamics 365 and all of the whole idea of business applications with Microsoft. And we've been talking about this for a long time, and we've always thought that this day will come where I would have the chance to come back to South Africa. This is my third time here, and we were just going to sit down and talk about this. So this is exciting. But yeah, for all of those of you listening, I have Paul Slade right here on the show today. So Paul, welcome.
Thanks, guys.
Officially, finally.
Appreciate it. It's been a long time coming.
I know. And it's like we've met in other places, but we've never really sat down to record this thing. Paul and I met, when was it? Like how long ago?
I was trying to figure that out. It was before CRM Rockstar, right? I mean, it was on the interweb.
Yeah.
That was our first over Twitter.
I know. And we got to talk about that. We got to talk about sort of all the ventures that you've had over the years. Because I think I've heard of you guys when you were working with Dylan.
Yeah.
And then we sort of got to know each other with CRM Rockstar. And I feel it was because when it launched, there were only a few of us who sort of went into it and added our experience and all of the information that we had. And I thought the idea was cool. It's to have a way to recognize professionals and to have essentially a database where you can go and find out if people's credentials were legit and how they stacked against other talent out there. So it was great. And then, from there, because I was one of the early adopters, I think you reach out to all of us and
Absolutely.
sort of ask, how can I make this better?
Yeah.
So I think that's where we met.
Load of conversation came from that, and obviously your advice was extremely valuable in building up CRM Rockstar, which became Rockstar 365, and then later on Techfolio.
Yeah, I know.
We're trying to find our identity.
Exactly. So before we start talking about sales and all that stuff, why don't you tell people who you are, what do you do, and so sort of your history within Dynamics.
Okay. It's been a bit of a strange one. So right now I am the CEO of a company called the CRM team, and we have to preface it with the company called the CRM team because loads of people kind of get confused and they go, oh, so are you our CRM team? Are you Microsoft CRM team? Where do you fit in? But if we go back in time, I suppose I started my career as a rowing boat builder. So I'm a composite engineer by trade and realized that building boats in South Africa and trying to ship them across the world is not a good idea, especially when you want to build a bit of a base and maybe get married at some point in time and have a little bit of cash on hand. So that business got closed up and
but at some point you moved to the U.S., right? And you lived there and did something about rowing, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was there so in about 2000, I traveled the world a bit. So I went to Perth, I went to Sydney. I was in Sydney for the 2000 Olympics, which was awesome. Incredible.
Yeah.
And then spent time in Boston and then later on in Auburn in Alabama. And then finally
just
came
like
over to South Africa.
All kinds of random places.
Random places. Good to be young. Go get around the world. So I spent time, I rode in Perth and raced in Boston. Didn't do very well. I was pretty sick there. But other than that, you go back in time, rowing was my passion. And I just thought you could make money out of your passion, which isn't always true. In some cases it is.
Right.
But pivoting out of that, I needed to get my life back on track, as my dad called it. And I met a guy at a braai, which is a barbecue. But, in South Africa, braais trump barbecues.
Yeah.
And
they're awesome.
And this guy, Dylan, said, well, why don't we start this business thing together we're talking about? And we ended up building a golf booking system. And Dylan was a great technologist. This guy really got it.
He is. Like, he still, works in Dynamics. He's an MVP.
He's an MVP. He left South Africa, went to Auckland. Has a beautiful family out there, done very, very well. I think he's the practice manager for a company called Intergen right now.
Intergen is huge.
It's huge. It's done very well.
That's awesome.
Great guy. And we ended up building this golf booking system. And on top of that, it's way back before smartphones existed. We were trying to figure out how can someone book via their mobile device. And we sort of worked with technology called USSD. And you're able to dial a number *120* and followed by whatever kind of short code.
Wow.
And then book some kind of a round of golf.
It's interesting because today I would think that doing a system like that would be harder than do it with an app or something.
Oh, yeah.
Like I feel that on a website or whatever, doing it on your phone will be easier to make than to having to call. Like I have no idea how I would like set it up so you hit dial star 20 star or whatever. Like I don't even know. That sounds super complicated, I think, by today's standards.
It was, I suppose, in some respects, but because we had no other point of reference, it was the only way we could get it done. That business was a complete and utter failure, though, because none of the golf clubs had any systems you could integrate with. They were all written in paper. So you couldn't go, let's sort of figure out how do we automatically book into your system.
Right.
And then a weird turn of events, and a friend of ours had sort of contacted us while we were sitting in Dylan's garage, effectively trying to build our booking business, and said, look, I've got this deal. It's coming up. It's a CRM deal. I didn't even know what that was. Yeah. And we need to go to Microsoft. I need your help because Dylan's got this great technology ability, so he can help us understand this.
He'll figure it out.
He'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So we went along to Microsoft, and in the meeting, they were talking about this new version of CRM that was coming, which was version 3. And they were so excited about
Groundbreaking.
it. Web services and integration. And
mouse.
It's huge. And the guys are talking language I didn't even know what that meant. So, I mean, in that meeting, Dylan spent some time, probably about 25 minutes, integrating our booking platform into CRM in the demo environment that the guys had.
Just on the fly.
On the fly. Just got it done. 20 minutes. And next thing, you were able to call up a contact record. You were able to check an opportunity, all on a dumb phone, like a basic old Nokia device. And the Microsoft guys in the room went crazy. We thought that meant they were going to buy us. What it actually meant is Vaynant, he's just excitable anyway.
Oh, yeah, Vaynant is.
and he just
ballistic.
Went, you got to get out to TechEd. So we got, I think about 2 weeks after that, we were on the stage at TechEd in front of a packed audience, which I've never seen before or since for a Dynamics event at a technical conference.
Right.
And we did mobile CRM.
So let me get this right. So less than a month before TechEd, you guys didn't even know CRM existed.
No, I didn't even know what it was.
And 3 weeks later, you were on stage as world-class experts in CRM.
Wow. I like you add the world-class expert.
Well, I mean, you're on stage at TechEd. That's
we looked world-class. There was a sort of a segue in the back end of that story, but we had to use our local gateways, which are with the phone providers.
Yeah.
So MTN and Vodacom. And about 20 minutes before the actual demo, everything went down. So Dylan's sitting in the front row. I think this is completely abnormal. He looks completely calm, and he's just doing stuff on his machine while I'm on stage already starting the presentation, looking at him for the signal that goes, we're good. You can fire this thing up now. And when he gave it to me, I mean, I was sweating through my jacket. It was so bad. But it was crazy because even though we'd sort of gotten onto stage around CRM, I didn't think we were going to become a CRM business. But people came up to us after this presentation and went, that was amazing. We want the mobile capability, but we don't have CRM at all. Can you help us? And Vaynant went, yes, they can. And we became a CRM business. Yeah. So that's it. That's awesome. Yeah, that was back in the day. And that business was called BMO Software, which was an acronym for Buy Me Out.
Yeah.
And
so just straight to the point.
Straight to the point. Eventually sold that off and then went to work for Microsoft, joined Vaynant at Microsoft and basically ran different areas of Dynamics, public sector, financial services, coastal, those different sort of quality areas and ended up building, I suppose, a bit of a sales capacity in ourselves and in the partner ecosystem.
I wonder how good that works. Like, we should start naming businesses after stuff we want it to happen at the end.
Yeah. Leave me alone.
Yeah, I want to be a billionaire. Acronyms.
So freaking bad.
Yeah, exactly.
Sounds like lyrics.
Exactly. No, that's awesome. And so you guys got acquired, and then ultimately you started a few other ventures, right? Like CRM Rockstar. Why did you even start CRM Rockstar? What was the point?
That was after Microsoft. It was part of my thinking was that you always had to rely on a single company. And the concern was whether or not that company actually had the skill to deliver the project you had.
Right.
And in the end, I thought, well, what does the future of this look like? And the future in my mind was specific individuals who had certain types of skills coming together for that particular project and solving the problem in record time and then just moving on with it. Obviously, ideally getting paid a lot more money for the time that they were spending instead of just billing hours. So my goal was to go, well, how do I get this database going of people who can then collaborate on these projects but have real proven skill?
Right.
And that's where that started off. It was literally an idea that happened on a Saturday afternoon, and by the Monday morning we had a website up just to see if it would work. And we got like 180 signups in a day and a half.
Yeah.
So,
people love to brag about their experience, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everyone wanted to be on that. And then it eventually transformed into TechFolio. Obviously, you went through Rockstar 365 after the whole naming change of Dynamics 365.
Yes.
And so TechFolio was more about providing talent, right, for companies out there as well.
It was the sort of segue for us to try and stay alive. I mean, showcasing people's skills and abilities was one thing, and that was the primary intention. But in the end, we just found it was really difficult to figure out what the business model was going to be. And it's one of my biggest failings. I just sort of went, I'm not quite sure what to do with this thing.
Yeah. So it's like a great idea, but how do we make money out of it?
How do we make money out of it?
Yeah.
And how do we make it sustainable?
Yeah.
And the reality was we should have been matching individuals to these projects. And what companies were sort of telling us is we don't really want that. We want to know who we can hire. We want to know how do we put this thing together. And we were sensitive about it. I'm not a huge fan of recruitment agencies for many reasons. And I think that's probably a whole podcast on its own. But
podcast about recruiting agencies, that would be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's pros and cons there. They fill a certain requirement in the market, and I think the way that some of those things work is not ideal. Hence, part of what we were trying to do there. So we thought, well, if we can get this right, what effectively happens is you bypass that entire process, pay a tiny amount of money, and get access to the best talent who actually are looking for jobs, not like LinkedIn getting pinged every week, 10, 12 times going, hey, do you want to come work for this company? So we thought we had a better model, but LinkedIn deprecated the API very quickly, and a few others shut us down. So Twitter and those kind of folks were like, you can't pull data from us, even though, by the way, it's the end user's data. So that made our lives very difficult. And in the end, it probably wasn't a sustainable model. We couldn't get it to scale in terms of making any kind of cash. So we said, well, we'll let it exist in the world, and we'll move on. Yeah,
that makes sense. I think we met, towards the tail end of TechFolio, which is when you were essentially focusing on the CRM team.
Yeah,
you were starting the CRM team. There was only like 3 of you.
Exactly.
When we met, and I remember thinking like we had this conversation, and I think it was here in South Africa or maybe in the U.S. Where we had this conversation about sort of what you thought will make you guys different.
Yeah.
Because I'm always intrigued by that. I'm always intrigued when I meet people who are starting a CRM practice or they're starting a CRM partner or a business, sort of understanding what makes you guys different. Because that was always a question that I wanted to answer for myself with Elevate. If I leave this partner I was with and I started Elevate, what's going to make me different? Like, why should I do that other than I want to be my own boss and all those, reasons that people put themselves through. But for me, it was sort of like, okay, I think that what makes us different is that we want to focus on these kinds of customers or whatever. That was our difference. But when I asked you the question, what makes you different? You said something that I've never heard before from another partner, which is the fact that you wanted to be a complete partner. You saw a gap in the market where, partners would come in. This is true, by the way. I agree with you on that. Partners would come in and sort of work with the business to understand their process. Yeah. And then sort of translate that process into functionality with Dynamics 365. But there's not a whole lot of partners out there that have the skills to also consult in the process.
Yeah.
One thing is to say, okay, how is your marketing process? And somebody tells you, well, we have email campaigns and this is what we do. And then you say, okay, we're going to use click dimensions. So you're a technician, so you figure out what technology you're going to use to help them. But you mentioned you wanted to go a step beyond that and say, okay, this is not how you guys should be doing marketing. We think you should do it this way. And I think that's one of the things that attracted me to sort of your model, which was you want to not only consult in the technology, but you also want to consult them on their processes and marketing and sales and customer service. Yeah. Let's fix your process and on top of that, implement the technology to back you up and support it. Yeah. So that was awesome. So how do you come up with that idea, essentially? Because I think that idea perhaps is not new, but I don't think anyone took it as seriously as you when you started a CRM team.
It's again the same sort of thought process that I've had in the startups that I've run before, which is what does the future of this thing look like? And when we look at the CRM team exists for 2 main reasons. The one is when Vaynant, who had also left Microsoft, and myself would meet just down the road here at a great car wash called the Wash Bay Cafe, have a great lunch and get the cars cleaned up. We would talk about what Microsoft partners looked like. And our problem was that we would often have sold deals at Microsoft, handing them over to partners, and in some cases they were successful, but that wasn't the norm. The norm was painful projects, long processes, not a lot of value out at the end of the day, and a very, very hard renewal when it came time to have that discussion with the customer, and even harder to grow those. So we said, well, what does the ideal partner business look like? And the first things we said, well, it would be great if the business took a lot of ownership. If the people in the team didn't say things like, oh, the customer didn't give me the data, and that's why we're 3 weeks late. So it'd be great if they took some ownership. The next part of it was we had to change the model for the implementation process, which had to be agile. You have to have this ability to test and learn. And I know your background has a lot of that experience in it as well, and you see the benefit of that. And then also you have to figure out enablement. So the training team can't just be CRM consultants who don't understand how to train users, because you hear the standard excuses when they come back to the office going, the users aren't high level enough. They don't understand computers.
Yeah.
That means we've just failed in building the system that we were meant to ship for these users who were meant to get the value from it. But ultimately, even when you build that capability in your business, you still have this challenge where you have a customer that's telling you how they are now, and you're trying to translate that into technology. You have to try and move their needle by going, you're here because you think about things this way, and these processes are really good. Keep doing more of those because you can see the results in the numbers. But there's other areas where we can show you how to improve. And you get the big consulting houses who go and do that, and they charge a lot of money, and they build a document, and they very, very seldom actually make it real. So our goal was to try and come up with very simple models that are so basic but genius behind the scenes that we can enable people to use and actively get benefit from very, very quickly. And we started with the marketing and sales funnel. So we make that one process. We don't split that into two separate parts. We explain CRM as a concept, which is what we call the CRM Circle, and we try and get people to understand their business only really revolves around the customer in 4 areas: marketing, sales, delivery, and service. And you can name it whatever you like depending on your industry, but in each of those areas, very simple models and processes and things that we have available help move those companies forward. So we feel that in the future, a CRM business like ours becomes more of an agency as well, like being able to help execute, get a company sort of ramped up to the point where they can manage it themselves and then hand over and let them mature on their own. So combining those things is very, very difficult, though, because the standard skill set that you need is different to the kind of business that most Dynamics partners have attempted to build.
That's right.
And it's why if you look around our office and you have people that are doctors, pastors, authors, economists, PhD students in artificial intelligence, and you get these folks that are quite different, and it takes time to help them understand Dynamics, but they understand a world that I don't come close to.
Yeah. No, amazing. And yesterday I was talking to somebody. We went to dinner, obviously, with some people from the team, and she was in the South African Stock Exchange.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now she's working here. So yeah, that kind of diverse background is really what helps you deliver that service.
Absolutely.
Of not only understanding the technology, but understanding the process behind it and what makes you successful, what makes you different than your competitors, how can you beat your competitors. Yep. So that's all important. So what is typically the process to essentially when you engage with an organization, how do you sell them the concept of Dynamics and CRM and that the 4 process of the CRM Circle that you mentioned? How does that conversation go? And how often do you find yourself? Because for me, I find myself talking to IT a lot, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of these companies, I mean, there's no way around it. A lot of those companies see Dynamics 365 because it has the name Microsoft on it as an IT solution. So
Absolutely.
Typically your first point of contact will be somebody from the technology side. How do you quickly get around that to have the business conversation?
So you got about 5 questions in one, because it is a complex problem, and it's one that has to be solved if you really want to win the right kind of deals. If you look at Microsoft's history, the account managers typically engage with the CIO and their team. And as a result, when you get an introduction from anyone at Microsoft, you're dealing with the tech folks. Or if you try and run a campaign and you're saying, well, let's talk about this CRM thing or this Dynamics 365 thing, they go, yeah, my IT guys will get hold of you and see how this fits together in our business. So you find yourselves in that process really stuck when it comes to figuring out how you're going to get around and actually get to the people who own the budget. Because if we're 100% clear now, Gartner's predictions around who actually owns the budget for marketing they've come true. I mean, the technology budgets are shrinking, and the folks like the CMO have the big budgets. The CFO can move money around as long as it's going to move the needle. And if you can't get to them or influence them, how on earth are you going to get the big deal or the customer to commit to the right kind of work with you over the next few years? And it's a constant problem we have. But there's some simple tactics in order to get around the IT folks. And the first thing is not to try and get around them completely. You have to influence them. So it's funny that even though we know these lessons, how in the CRM team we've failed at this on occasion, where we try and bypass IT and we go, wow, it's awesome. We're dealing with business now, and we're working with the business so successfully. And right at the end of the deal, we get the IT folks involved because they have to pull the trigger on the enterprise agreement or whatever that is, and they just pull a full stop on this whole thing because they know nothing about it. So you figure out that you've got to actually get everybody on the same page. And when you're dealing with the technical decision makers, helping these folks understand what this means in their environment is probably dependent on where they are from a maturity point of view. The first thing is if they're not cloud friendly, which is a huge drive for us because we don't really do on-premise work anymore, you've got to get them cloud friendly. So you've got to get them aware, they've got to consider it, they've got to understand what their risks are, and then they've got to go, yeah, this is something we can actually go ahead and do. So you might have a whole process that unfolds in the meantime where you're going, let's get these people onto a sort of state or into a state where they understand what it is we're going to be bringing in and how they're going to manage it and benefit from it in their environment. So that's hugely difficult, but I'm sure, as good Dynamics partners are listening to this particular podcast, they understand what it takes to get someone from I'm not confident and comfortable with the platform to the point where they're going, this makes a lot of sense. I can see the Microsoft value proposition here, and off they go. And in parallel, you need to begin to influence the business decision makers. And if you've got a good IT or technical team, typically they're looking for that opportunity to move business's needle, and you just have to give them the right assets that they can have the conversations with the business folks, and ideally build the sort of reputation you have with them to the point where they'll take you to meet the business guys. We don't leave that to chance. We end up having our marketing team. We're a dedicated marketing team that actually works to influence the business decision makers around the sort of the back of that process anyway, and we try and work a tandem process, which has typically been quite successful for us. But it's not an uncommon challenge that you face with there.
That's awesome. Now, just playing devil's advocate a little bit, one of the conversations that typically comes up when you're talking about dynamics is the businesses, whether that is on the business side or the IT side. There's always someone who says, "But I thought the leader is Salesforce," or I thought the leader was SAP on the ERP side. How do you have that conversation with companies that bring that up? How do you sell Dynamics as a better choice? Because obviously I believe it's a better choice, but how do you guys do it?
We just bash our competitors.
You just bash them. That horrible company.
I'm just kidding. That's definitely not something you want to do. And I mean, I know that in the US you guys have competitive advertising, and the rest of the world typically doesn't. So it's extremely frowned upon when you go, those guys are nonsense. They don't know what they're doing. In reality, we all know that that's not true. SAP and Salesforce tell a beautiful story, and their tech, if used correctly, is going to have a great impact on the business. So it means that when you're engaging with a customer, you've got to be pretty sensitive about how you're actually engaging and what it is you say about your competitors. So the value proposition in our minds is pretty simple. First of all, if they're going to raise those particular competitors, we say the same things as I just mentioned now. Well, that's a great technology stack. And if you use it correctly, you can really have a good impact. They've done it. They've got proven references. It makes sense. But we always tell the story about why we chose Microsoft, because we did. We weren't forced to go and choose Microsoft again. I mean, I've got some experience in the Salesforce ecosystem. Vaynand's got experience at SAP. He ran pre-sales for Africa for them. And SAP is a great platform as well. It's complex in some respects, but still. So we tell the story of why we chose Microsoft, which is the one Microsoft story, the story that sort of the marketing folks tell pretty well, and we need to internalize. And that is this entire productivity stack at the top, which is Dynamics and Office put together, and then underpinned by Flow, Power BI, Power Apps, Azure, all of those things in one stack owned by one company. That is the value proposition for us, this tight integration that actually now works the way that it's been sold, that actually allows us to deliver value to our customers in record time on a platform that most of those users understand and are comfortable with because of the front end. And it's obvious when we show to them what the difference is. I love that when we tell that story and then we show them what this thing looks like. They go, this is just like Office. That's so cool. I've seen that. Oh, click over there. Look how cool that is. And it just moves into Excel. Awesome. But the risk story is what you want to inject while telling that, because you want to be able to go, Salesforce is a great tool set. But by the way, when they talk about AI, that might not be Salesforce's AI. Maybe that's IBM Watson over there, and we've heard stories that might be the case, or that their field service capabilities actually click. And how much influence do they have on that roadmap? Whereas Microsoft own it end to end. It's a beautiful story.
Yeah, no, that's awesome for sure. And I know you mentioned the concept of ownership, as a partner, and sort of don't let your customers sort of own things, and you sort of step back and say, well, we haven't gotten the data, so so be it. The project's going to be late. And the concept of ownership is interesting, because I think when I look at the things that I do, or the things that I guess are happening, you've influenced in a lot of ways the things that I do today. So just for example, I remember the first time I came to South Africa, you picked me up at the hotel or whatever. So we could go. I don't remember what we were doing. If it was
Lion and Rhino Park.
Yeah, is that what we did the first time? Okay, so you picked me up and you were listening to the Joe Rogan podcast, right?
Yeah.
You're a big podcast listener, and the episode you were listening to was the Jocko Willink episode, right? And you told me, it's like, oh, have you heard about this dude? And obviously, I was into Navy SEALs and I think the whole United States Army and military history and all of that. I'm a big military history guy, and just understanding military and weapons and all that stuff. I just enjoy that. It's Delta Force, exactly. I've read books by that point, but I've never heard of Jocko Willink by that point. So we sort of listened to it together. A couple of things came out of that. So number one is I hadn't listened to the Joe Rogan podcast before that, really. And I ended up sort of, when I started podcasting, I ended up like using the equipment that Joe Rogan uses, because there's a list online where they share sort of all the stuff that they use, and that's what I decided to go for. I like the sound of that podcast. But the second thing was, you talked about Jocko Willink, and you talked about this book that you just read, or you started reading, or you just finished reading by that point when we met, which was Extreme Ownership, right?
Yes.
And you said, you got to read this thing. And you spoke so highly of it that I bought it, and I read it within a few days. And it's a good book. I always recommend it. I think that it accomplished a couple things for me. Number one, it reinforced the things that I was already doing, that I thought they were the right way to do it. It wasn't always the way things work on the companies that I work for. For example, the concept of decentralized command. You should trust your people. You should give them sort of direction regarding, this is the end outcome that I hope for. But you should come up with a way to do it. And the idea behind that is that obviously people can come up with their own way of doing it, their own plan. And if you are following your own plan, you work hard to make sure that it doesn't fail.
Absolutely.
Instead of giving somebody the plan, like, these are the 5 things I need to do, and this is how you're going to do them. If it doesn't work, they know they can say, well, that wasn't my plan. You told me to do it. It didn't work. So it was your stupid idea, right?
Absolutely.
They can always default to that. So I was always big into decentralized command. And again, a couple of the principles from Extreme Ownership that I practice, it was good to have it reinforced. And then I learned a few new ones that I really liked as well. And we ended up going into the muster number 1, which was the sort of the opportunity to go and train with the SEALs.
Yes.
Live in San Diego, which was pretty
incredible.
awesome, right? And getting to meet them, and we hung out for a few days there. But you went a little bit further. I feel that I went to muster. I learned from them. I asked some really good questions, or I asked some questions. They gave me some really good answers, and I sort of listened to the podcast and all of that. But it reinforced the principles I was already following. You went a little bit further, right? You brought the guys here to the company. You brought them to South Africa. You had a large event with them here that was highly successful. So talk about how you guys practice or embrace the extreme ownership, and not to, I mean, again, we recommend the book. Obviously, we recommend, the principles the guys stand for. So that's good. But we're not trying to advertise on that. I'm trying to sort of pick up, what is it from those principles that make you guys more successful, that took you guys to the next level? How do you guys practice extreme ownership here?
It's such an interesting one because the cycle of attempting to bring the principles of extreme ownership into our business brought its own learnings. I went full idiot when I tried to put it into the business.
Full, 100%.
100%.
Yeah. We're all waking up at 4:30.
Yes. And I still get up at 4:30 in the morning.
Wow.
I still do a bit of a workout, nothing major, but it's changed the way that my day works.
You know, I try doing that, right?
It's
I
hard.
try waking up at 4:30.
Yeah.
And I think it was like, and by the way, I'm talking about this because the guys that we're talking about, Jocko Willing and Leif Babin, they are like, they have this thing called like 4:35 club, is it or something?
4:45 club.
4:45, yeah. So the idea is you wake up super early, like at 4:30. You work out,
Yeah.
you take a shower, and you do some work right before everyone wakes up, right? They say up before the enemy.
Up before the enemy.
Exactly. So I tried that a couple times. So here's what happened. I woke up. It was like 4:20 or something. I get ready. I go and, work out. Like, I'm done by 5. Like, how long
2
do you
hours.
work out? Like, either you take it super easy
Yeah.
and you can work out for like an hour and a half or whatever,
Yes.
or you go hardcore and 30 minutes in, you're dead,
Yeah.
right? So it's 5. So you take a shower and you're ready to go by like 5:20, 5:30.
Yeah.
Where am I getting? Like, I'm already tired. I want to go back to sleep. Like, I don't have the strength to. I'm gonna do a couple hours of work,
Yeah.
and then around 8:30, 9, everybody starts calling me, and then I'm gonna have a full day of work. It just doesn't work like that. It just didn't work for me at all. I wanted to be part of the club, but
Yeah.
I wasn't able to stick around.
You don't need to be part of the club.
Right.
The club it's something separate. I mean, I think that the underlying thought process there is discipline. So getting up early, getting on top of the things you need to get on top of, that's the underlying principle versus you have to do a workout for an hour, et cetera, et cetera. But, like I said, I went full in on this thing.
Yeah.
I mean, the joke became that Paul is the high priest of the church of extreme ownership. So much so that Leif still teases me about that. And he goes, how's the high priest doing? How's the church in South Africa? And
How was it having those guys here, by the way? Because
That's just incredible.
they're scary dudes. I mean, if you don't know them, obviously they're cool guys, but it's interesting, right?
They're amazing.
Yeah,
They're amazing, and I mean, bringing them out here was a turning point for me. So there were 2 turning points. The one is, first of all, I went a little bit extreme, and the book title is almost misleading in that you shouldn't be just owning everything. You should be working to get your team to work towards the overall objective and owning that objective.
Right.
And those principles are how to go ahead and do that. But obviously going to the muster, which was a good few months after starting to try and bring these principles into the business, was great for me because you start to learn what the nuances are of the principles, which there are many, by the way. So learning those makes you substantially more effective in how you lead your team and how you spread the principles versus going, you all have to read the book, and have you all read the book? And principle number 2 says this, and the law of combat says that.
Yeah.
Go to page 73. and I mean, that doesn't really work. So you've got to learn what that means. But bringing them out to South Africa was a huge thing for us. They trained our team for 2 days, and then they ran the event.
Yeah, and they did a radio show too, right?
The radio show that was meant to be 8 minutes and lasted 45. It's still on SoundCloud, which is incredible.
Yeah.
And it was so funny because listening to the answers that they gave to my team around the questions that had been prepared, every single answer was nuanced and different to what was expected. So in some cases, even the team members were trying to set up an answer. They thought they knew what they were going to get, and they wanted someone else to sort of get the message that they, that was correct.
See, I told you.
I told you. I knew it. I knew Jocko was going to agree with me. And they didn't. They didn't agree. And
So can you give me an example of like a question that surprised you guys, or the answer that surprised you guys?
the one thing we were dealing with a very tough customer at the time. I mean, these guys were difficult. They would shout and scream and swear, no problem. It's just a culture in their business. They would blame anyone else except for their internal team, even when it was blatantly obvious that it was something that failed, something way beyond your control, like access to the building, those kind of things. And they would still scream and shout and swear. So our head of delivery, Jess, was asking what to do in that situation. And she painted the picture with these guys and how they actually speak to people. And she was expecting Jocko to go, screw those guys, bring the hammer, put the hammer down.
Yeah.
And Jocko went, well, what are you doing in those meetings? Are you de-escalating that situation? or are you escalating it?
Yeah.
And when she went through what she was actually doing, she was causing more trouble. And as a result, the customer was getting angrier, swearing and screaming even more. So Jocko
was she like, it's no big deal. Like, take it easy.
Calm down. Just calm down. You know what that's like. You try and tell your wife to calm down if she's upset about something. It doesn't go well.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what was happening with these customers.
I read a meme today. Now that you mentioned, I was on Facebook or something. It's like, I don't know. I don't encourage people to try this, but I think it will be hilarious. It was something like, next time you're fighting with your wife and your wife says, like, I'm angry, you should grab a cape and put it around her and be, now you're super angry. See if that works out for you. It's like, she will either laugh or you'll either die. One of the two.
It's probably a bit of both. She'll laugh and then you'll die.
Exactly. Okay, so she was causing obviously more problems. So what did Jocko say?
So Jocko, first of all, I mean, he had just come in on that morning, and I originally said to the guys, "Do you want a half a day just to rest?" And he went, "No, we'll be good to go." So
because he traveled like a million hours to get here, right?
Yeah,
it's like, no, I'll be
30 hours, and he thought he'd be good to go. But we were right next door to the Red Bull offices. So just before he answers the question, he goes, "How about a Red Bull?" And Leif says, last time I saw Jocko on Red Bull was in 2006 in Ramadi. So we get a couple of Red Bulls and bring them into the office. And the guys next door were super happy to give some Navy SEALs Red Bull for free. And Jocko crushes a couple of Red Bulls. And his energy levels go from pretty intense to over-the-top, crazy, extreme intense. So as he's answering this question, the Red Bulls are kicking in. So he says, why don't we role play? I love role play. Let's do a role play. So he turns over. Andrew's sitting on his left-hand side, one of our project managers, and he stands up from his chair and he starts screaming at Andrew like he's the customer, going, "Hey, Andrew," like going crazy, pointing his finger. Andrew like reels back in his chair and he's telling Jess to de-escalate. "Come on, Jess, de-escalate." And she's got this like perfect voice normally, but because Jocko's got this deep voice, she's going, "Excuse me, Jocko, can I just..." And he goes, "Come on, Jess, you're gonna get stuck in on this thing." And he goes, "Let's do that again." And he just screams at Andrew again, and it's exactly the same reaction. Andrew's hanging off the back of his chair. Jess is going, "Excuse me, Jocko," trying to calm him down. But it was such a great day learning from these guys because they just constantly look for the end objective to be achieved.
Yeah.
And quite often that means not taking the direct path. It doesn't mean going, let's have a confrontation or let's just blaze a trail. They sometimes take a step back and they work around the situation and they influence people. And
they talk about the principle of flanking, right?
100%. It's exactly what they're talking about doing. And they keep saying, is what you're doing helping you achieve the objective? But there was a moment in the day which was kind of brutal for me because I thought I'd sort of gotten the team up to speed on what our mission was. I knew they were going to ask. So I said to the team for a couple of weeks beforehand, you know what our mission is? And I would make sure I repeated it ad nauseum. And on the day, Leif says, "Does everyone know what the mission is?"
Nobody.
No one.
No one wanted to say.
No one gets it. People are like, And so he goes around the table. And when he's done with everybody in the room, he turns to me and he goes, "I think you need a new mission." So that was kind of brutal. But the end result was incredible because the very next week, we all sat down and rolled out this huge piece of white paper that we got, and people broke out the Sharpies, and we built the mission as a team. And even though it's not exactly a mission, there's a clear set of principles that is the DNA of our business, which if you ask anyone now, they'll tell you. They might use slightly different words in the order, but they'll tell you exactly. They'll say, we want to work with extraordinary people who every day want to be 2% better, who practice extreme ownership, who when in doubt do the honorable thing, who understand that we partner with our customers, and when our customers win, we win.
Right.
And they mean it. And that's the mission that they built. So your comment earlier about letting someone understand what the objective is, and then they go and plan it, and letting them own that plan, the result is hugely positive. And that's what happened with that mission. And right now, when you listen to anyone in the business, and the way that they talk about going ahead and trying to achieve the overall objective for the client, it's obviously a different approach. I think the single biggest problem in our business when it comes to good leadership and extreme ownership is always me. I look at how I react in situations, and afterwards I'm typically slapping my forehead going, "Damn it, I really could have done a better job there."
Right.
And I think that's just the constant journey of these things. But the principles in the way that they've been learned and practiced and constantly refined constantly make sense when you see how they impact a customer. And I think it's valuable to anyone to go and read the book, get the understanding of the basics of the principle, try to start practicing them and see the impact in your business. Just don't go full idiot and try and become the high priest, because that's my role.
Yeah, and you went full on, like you started jiu-jitsu, like
flat out.
Yeah. Just 100%. But as the high priest of the Extreme Ownership Church of pipe hitters. So how, for the people that are obviously not going to go and read the book and all of that, what are some of the principles that you practice here at the CRM team that would help? Again, people listening to this, they work at partners, they might not go and get into extreme ownership and all of that, but what are maybe the 3 things that you would encourage every partner out there to do to make them better, whether it is to make their customers more successful or them more successful as a partner or provide more value? What would you say, here are the 3 things I think you can implement that would elevate you to that next level as a partner?
Tricky to choose. I would say the first thing is be crystal clear with what the business's objective is. As a leader, if you can't answer what that question is, you are not able to tell your team, and as a result, what are they going to get behind? What are they going to go out there and do in the world? So be crystal clear on your objective. And again, a lesson that we've learned there is you don't have to have it perfect day one, but keep refining it and trying to explain it in the most simple way. Make sure people are bought into that as well. The next one is understand the value of teamwork. You've hired a whole lot of people that are special, that have certain attributes and skills, and I guarantee you that no one comes to work going, I want to do a rubbish job today, or a crappy job, depending on where you are in the world, and see if that makes sense. But people want to come in and they want to do a good job. They want to have a good day where they go home and feel like they were successful in that. So enable your people to have that opportunity, because if you're going to constantly tell them what to do and micromanage them all the time, which, by the way, you have to micromanage a little bit when people are new in the business, because you need to teach them the way that you work and you need to enable them and empower them. But once they've got it, they've got it. You don't need to be all over them telling them, why didn't you do this? And go send this email and make sure you send this out now. So let people own their day, and because they understand the overall objective, they'll end up working pretty hard towards that. And the third thing is allow people to own things in a way that you can go, here's the objective, I'm going to trust you, and then actually trust them to go ahead and do that. I know I'm speaking about this at a leadership level, but people assume that's the managing director of the business, the CEO. It's everybody in the business, the project manager, the team leads, the technical leads, whoever they are, everybody leads in this process. So making sure you're enabling your people, and then as part of the project teams, doing the same things with your customer and working as a single unit are going to be really important in that. But I mean, I say those things pretty high level. They're tricky to get right.
No, I understand. And I think people listening to this, it might not be practice leads or managers or CEOs or whatever. They can still benefit from it, because there's a principle in extreme ownership, which is leading up the chain of command, which is even if you're not the manager of the practice and all of that, you can still follow these principles up the chain of command.
Absolutely.
Right? Work with your boss or your manager or your team. And I think these concepts are very important to be successful as a partner.
Look, I think my team manage me better than anyone else. I mean, you got to see the way that these guys handle me. They send me information via Slack. We don't use Teams yet, but they'll drop me little notes, and they'll make sure that prior to meetings we're all aligned, that I've got the information, that I'm not going to get sideswiped by anything that's going to just come out of the left field. They make sure that they've led up the chain and they've got us all on the right track. And that changes the game completely. And besides that, these guys understand that when it comes, especially at a sort of middle layer management, these guys are looking after their people. And so sometimes running interference with us at the senior sort of exco level, it's a requirement in order to make sure their guys can get the space that they need to be successful. So leading up the chain is a big deal. And no matter who you are in the business, learning that is so important.
Absolutely.
It's a big deal.
That's awesome. Lastly, we don't have any CRM MVPs in South Africa. When are you going to go for it, man?
Nominate someone.
Come on. We need you. I think you're an amazing speaker. Obviously, you always have great stuff to talk about. I think people that listen to this podcast will want to know more about you and sort of hear from what you have to say. Obviously, it's tough to cover everything that you have experienced and sort of gather over the years in 1 hour. But how can people get in touch with you if they have any questions or any comments? What's the easiest way to reach out?
2 ways, and one is email. I'm going to give my email address out, see how that goes, which is paul@thecrmteam.com. Alternatively, on Twitter, which is an easy one, that CRM guy, which
That
is a
CRM guy.
name forced on me at some point in my career. Someone said,
Really?
can't remember your name.
You're that
so
CRM
you're
guy.
that CRM guy. I'm going
Right?
to register Twitter for you.
That's awesome. I make you a Twitter
I'll
account.
make your Twitter account.
That's awesome. So yeah, Paul at thecrmteam.com and that CRM guy on
Absolutely.
Twitter. That's awesome. Yeah, so thank you everyone for tuning in to today's episode, and Paul for being a guest. Thank you. Can't wait to be back in South Africa and hopefully do another episode and keep, just pulling from all of that experience that you've gathered over the years. Hopefully people who have suggestions about things we can talk about, and hopefully I get to be back soon. I love South Africa. It's awesome.
Gus, we love having you. I mean, you opened our last office with training with some of our key customers. You're doing the same with our brand new office space. It was good then in our last office. I'm pretty sure it's a good sign for this space.
That's awesome.
And thanks for everything you do.
Absolutely. And thank you everyone again for listening. You can find all of our episodes at crmmvppodcast.com. And of course, follow us on Twitter for comments and make suggestions about future guests. So we are on Twitter at CRMMVP Podcast.